Picture this, a vast, unforgiving ocean, two colossal empires, locked in a struggle for global domination. The fate of the world hangs in the balance, and it's all about to be decided in one epic showdown on the high seas. This isn't a movie plot. This is the real story of the Battle of Trafalgar, a naval engagement so decisive, it shaped the course of history for the next 100 years. So, what was the big deal? Well, in the early 1800s, Napoleon Bonaparte was the man of the hour in Europe. He had conquered most of the continent, and his ambition knew no bounds. There was just one stubborn little island standing in his way: Great Britain. Napoleon knew he couldn't just march his Grande Army across the English Channel. The Royal Navy, Britain's legendary wooden walls, was the most formidable naval force on the planet. To invade Britain, he first had to smash its fleet. Napoleon's grand plan was a classic bait-and-switch. He ordered his combined French and Spanish fleets, led by Admiral Villeneuve, to sail to the West Indies. The idea was to lure the main British fleet, commanded by the one and only Vice-Admiral Horatio Nelson, across the Atlantic. Once Nelson was on a wild goose chase, Villeneuve's fleet would dash back to Europe, seize control of the English Channel, and clear the way for Napoleon's invasion force waiting on the French coast. It was a bold, complex plan, and for a moment, it actually seemed to be working. Nelson, ever the aggressive commander, took the bait. He chased Villeneuve all the way to the Caribbean and back. But Nelson wasn't just a brilliant tactician, he was also incredibly intuitive. He sensed something was off. While the French and Spanish fleet was sailing back to Europe, they got tangled up in a minor battle and had to retreat to the port of Cadiz in Spain for repairs. This was the moment Nelson had been waiting for. The hunter had cornered his prey. On October 21st, 1805, off Cape Trafalgar on the Spanish coast, the stage was set. Nelson had 27 ships of the line. His opponent, Admiral Villeneuve, commanded a larger combined fleet of 33 French and Spanish ships. On paper, the odds were against the British. The combined fleet had more ships, more guns, and more men. But Nelson had a secret weapon, a revolutionary new tactic. For centuries, naval battles were fought in a very formal, almost gentlemanly way. Two opposing fleets would form long, parallel lines and just blast away at each other until one side gave up. It was predictable, often indecisive, and led to long, drawn-out slugfests. Nelson thought this was, frankly, a bit boring and inefficient. He decided to throw the rulebook overboard. His plan, which became known as the Nelson Touch, was audacious. Instead of forming a single line parallel to the enemy, he would split his fleet into two columns. These two columns would then sail directly at the enemy's line, perpendicular to it, aiming to punch right through their formation. One column, led by his second-in-command, Admiral Collingwood, would attack the rear of the enemy line. The other column, led by Nelson himself, aboard his flagship HMS Victory, would smash into the center. The goal was to create chaos. By breaking the enemy line, Nelson could isolate parts of their fleet and destroy them in a chaotic close-quarters brawl before the rest of their ships could even turn around to help. It was an incredibly risky maneuver. Sailing head-on into the enemy's broadsides meant his lead ships would take a ferocious pounding without being able to fire back effectively. It was a gamble that required immense courage from his captains and crews. As the British fleet approached, Nelson famously hoisted a signal to his men. It wasn't a complex tactical order. It was a simple, powerful message that would echo through history. England expects that every man will do his duty. This wasn't just a command. It was an appeal to their patriotism, their honor, and their shared purpose. It electrified the entire fleet. The battle began around noon. Just as Nelson predicted, his lead ships, the Royal Sovereign and the Victory, endured a hellish storm of cannon fire as they closed the distance. Masts splintered, sails were shredded, and the decks ran slick with the blood of the brave men working the guns. But they didn't falter. Collingwood's Royal Sovereign was the first to break the line, unleashing a devastating broadside that ripped through the stern of the Spanish flagship, the Santa Ana. A few minutes later, Nelson's own HMS Victory pierced the enemy center, locking itself in a deadly embrace with the French flagship, the Bucentaur, and the mighty Redoutable. The battle devolved into a frantic, brutal melee. Ships were locked together, cannons firing at point-blank range, and Marines firing muskets from the rigging. It was the chaos Nelson had wanted, and in this environment, the superior training, discipline, and gunnery of the Royal Navy crews proved decisive. They could load and fire their cannons 3 times faster than their opponents. In a close-quarters fight, this speed was lethal. One by one, the French and Spanish ships were dismasted, battered into submission, and forced to surrender. The combined fleet was being systematically annihilated, but victory came at a terrible cost. At the height of the battle, as Nelson paced the quarterdeck of the Victory, a French sharpshooter perched high in the rigging of the Redoutable took aim. A single musket ball struck Nelson in the shoulder, passed through his lung, and lodged in his spine. The greatest naval commander of his age was mortally wounded. He was carried below deck to the cockpit, a dark, crowded space filled with the wounded and dying. Even in his final agonizing hours, his mind was on the battle. How goes the day? He repeatedly asked. He was told they had captured 15 enemy ships, then 18. He knew the victory was complete and decisive. His final words were, "Thank God, I have done my duty." Horatio Nelson died, knowing his plan had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. The results of the Battle of Trafalgar were staggering. The British didn't lose a single ship. The French and Spanish, on the other hand, lost 22. It was one of the most one-sided victories in the history of naval warfare. The immediate impact was enormous. Napoleon's dream of invading Britain was dead in the water. He would never again be able to challenge British supremacy at sea. He famously turned his attention eastward, leading to his fateful invasion of Russia. But the Spanish ulcer of the Peninsular War, supplied by the Royal Navy, would bleed his empire dry. Trafalgar ensured that Britain would remain free to oppose him, to fund coalitions against him, and to ultimately play a key role in his downfall at Waterloo a decade later. But the long-term consequences were even more profound. For the next 100 years, from 1805 all the way to the First World War, no other nation could seriously challenge the Royal Navy. This undisputed control of the world's oceans was the foundation of the Pax Britannica, a period of relative peace and immense British global power. It allowed Britain to build a vast overseas empire, to control global trade routes, and to project its influence to every corner of the globe. The world we live in today was shaped by this era. The spread of the English language, the development of global finance in the City of London, and even the lines on many world maps can be traced back to the century of British dominance that began on that fateful afternoon off the coast of Spain. So, when we talk about a battle that changed the fate of the world, Trafalgar is at the top of the list. It was more than just a naval victory. It was the moment that secured Britain's future, ended Napoleon's greatest ambition, and ushered in a new century of global history, all thanks to a brilliant, risky plan and the courage of the men who sailed headfirst into the fire. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more epic stories, and let me know in the comments what other world-changing battles you'd like to see covered. See you next time. In the cold dawn of a world trembling on the edge of collapse, there was a single battle. A battle not fought on land, but on the unforgiving throne of the sea. A battle so devastating, so decisive, that the fate of nations trembled with every cannon fired. This is the untold story of the High-Sea battle that changed the fate of the world. The year was one of fire, ambition, and empire. Two great powers, one rising, one fading, were locked in a struggle for global dominance. But every empire has its turning point, and this one would come crashing down upon the waves. Far across the ocean, massive fleets were being assembled, armadas forged with steel, wood, gunpowder, and unbreakable pride. Every ship carried not just cannons, but the dreams and fears of entire civilizations. On one side stood Admiral Thorne, a man carved from storms, feared even by his own officers, a strategist whose genius had rewritten the rules of naval combat. Opposing him was Admiral Sealis, the Iron Falcon, known for his calm command and unyielding resolve. A leader who believed destiny was forged, not inherited. Both knew what awaited them. Both knew only one would survive to tell the tale. And both accepted the terrible truth that history is written in blood and signed with fire. The sea roared as the fleets emerged from their harbors. Black sails, white sails, crimson sails, thousands of men watching the horizon. Knowing it was the last sunrise many of them would ever see, the ocean became a moving city of war. Rows of battleships lined with cannons, towers of masts cracking in the wind, shadows stretching across the endless blue. Every man aboard felt that the weight of a world's destiny settled upon their shoulders. The fog thickened, a silence deeper than death fell upon the sea. Then, a distant cannon, one thunderous roar that shattered the stillness. The fleets turned, the drums sounded, the sky trembled. The greatest high-sea battle in history had begun. The ocean exploded with cannon fire. Flaming shells arced across the sky like falling stars. Ships cracked open as steel met oak, and the sea swallowed men faster than they could scream. Boarding hooks clashed, swords met steel. Gunpowder filled the air like poison. Admiral Thorne's flagship, the Dominion, tore through enemy lines with monstrous faucets, triple-deck guns, spitting fire like a living beast. But Admiral Silas countered with precision, maneuvering his ships like blades, slicing through water, cutting off Thorne's advance. The sea turned black with smoke and red with blood. Just as victory seemed within Thorne's grasp, a storm unlike any seen in generations erupted. Lightning split the sky. Hurricanes tore through the fleets. Waves rose like mountains, crushing ships as if they were toys. The storm did not choose sides. It punished both equally. But Silas saw opportunity in the chaos. He ordered his ships to form the legendary V-Wing, a formation so dangerous that few dared attempt it. Through howling winds, they pierced into the heart of Thorne's armada, destroying his command ships, steering, cutting him off from his fleet. For the first time, the great Admiral Thorne felt fear. The storm eased just enough for the final confrontation. Thorne and Silas locked eyes across the burning water to Titans, standing on the decks of dying ships. With everything on the line, both fleets charged for their last attack. Cannons roared, decks shattered, the ocean boiled with fury. In the final moment, a single flaming shot from Silas's flagship struck the Dominion's powder chamber. Time held its breath. Then, a blinding explosion tore the sky apart. Thorne's ship vanished in a pillar of fire. His fleet broke. His empire fell. When the smoke cleared, the ocean was silent. The storm had passed, but the world would never be the same. Admiral Silas survived barely. He returned home not to glory, but to a world forever changed by his sacrifice.